and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you from Da Nang, Vietnam for the APEC Economic Leaders Week. Coming up on today's program, President Xi Jinping welcomes President Donald Trump Wednesday in Beijing before attending the APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Vietnam. Will Xi and other regional leaders help to unleash the region's potential? Our exclusive interviews in Da Nang with the World Bank Vice President on economic and trade realities in the Asia Pacific, followed by another exclusive with Malaysia's Minister for International Trade and Industry, and hear about his thoughts on the heated discussed trade mechanisms, RCEP and TPP. The 2017 APEC Economic Leaders Week is underway in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang, where leaders from the world's most dynamic economies, CEOs from across the Asia-Pacific region, as well as some of the most influential voices of this place, are gathering. The theme is creating new dynamism, fostering a shared future. Many hope they would push forward regional economic cooperation and development amid a rising sentiment of anti-globalization and trade protectionism. But how much can we expect? Earlier, I spoke with a panel of experts from the region. Let's hear their views. For more on APEC meetings, we are joined in our Beijing studio, Mr. Zhang Jianping, Director General from the Center for Regional Cooperation with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. In Washington, D.C., we're honored to be joined by Mr. Charles Freeman III, Managing Director of Bauer Group Asia and also former Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for China Affairs. Welcome. And in Singapore, Mr. Tian Wei, Adjunct Research Fellow at the National University of Singapore. Wow, when it comes to the Asia-Pacific region, a lot of stories going on all at the same time. Mr. Zhang, from your perspective, what are some of the most critical issues that you would anticipate about these meetings among APEC economic leaders?
Yeah, nowadays, actually, APEC meeting already becomes a very important institutions in the world, especially for multilateral economic cooperation. So in this regard, how to explore our new driving force in the region, economic growth rate, growth driving force. Meanwhile, how to promote trade and investment, integration and facilitation, and how to make those shared economy in the region, how to promote our, electronic ports. Right. And the global supply chain issues, many.
Well, yeah. Yes, there are a long list of things to be done, but Mr. Freeman, is Mr. Zhang too optimistic for one meeting to achieve all of this?
Well, he's optimistic. I think from a narrow U.S. perspective, United States perspective, I think this is important because this is the first meeting between the sitting U.S. president and significant number of Asian counterparts after the United States has pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. So in many respects, for the U.S. at least, and for those watching the United States, this is an important signal of continued commitment to the region, both economically and otherwise. So I certainly think the stakes are high.
The stakes are high, and people are, brainstorming about what kinds of mechanisms this meeting might embrace after all the intense expectations and discussions. Mr. Lim, TPP was only becoming part of it. There was a shrinked version. But the 11 economies seem to be determined to work on it. And yet, there are other different kinds of initiatives going on, proposed by players in the Asia-Pacific region or already implemented partly by some, for example, Belt and Road Initiative, Eurasian Corridor, and RCEP from China, from Russia, and some of the others. So what are going to be the main characters, let's just say, taking place in the conversations there?
I think if you listen to the Vietnamese leaders, who are the organizers of this year's APEC, they have stated three agendas for the meeting. The first agenda is that they want to see more sustainable development to combat climate change.
Yeah.
and to have a kind of a growth that is inclusive of everyone. The second one that they look at would be innovation and coming up with new technology.
Sure.
And to be able to come up with digital technology and also help different groups of people narrow the gap between them. Now the third one is much more institutional in nature. He hopes, or the leaders hope, that the free trade agreements can be encouraged in the region, particularly in an era where there are anti-globalization forces. And the institution that he specifically mentioned, that Vietnamese leaders specifically mentioned, was the free trade area of the Asia Pacific.
Well,
so
Mr.
SPAP.
Lin,
So I think the sort of long-term goal is for economies to work together.
Yeah. Well, of course, wishes coming from the host country is one thing. As to what extent the other parties want to join in so-called final achievements is another thing. And whether those goals set by the host are likely to be the goals by the attendees is another question too. So, Mr. Freeman, to the United States, what kind of interactions the president would have with the other parties at the APEC would mean a success back at home?
Well, whether we like it or not, APEC is not given that much attention back here in the United States, much less attention than it should be, frankly. But I do think that this is a president, in President Trump, who is a personality and very personable. And a lot of leaders in the APEC region will not have met him individually yet, and therefore will know him from his Twitter feed or from what they read in the newspaper. And so it's a good opportunity for them to take the measure of the man, and for him likewise to take the measure of his counterparts. This is a president, remember, who campaigned on a platform of unilateralism. And APEC is nothing if not multilateral in its focus. So it'll be an interesting opportunity for all sides.
For all sides to look, particularly when you have the president who prefer bilateral, when you have the president talking about America first, but this is a very multilateral platform. And those who believe in multilateralism would go there too. So, Mr. Freeman, is this going to mean a directional shift, or at least some switching of corners for President Trump?
I hope so. Anybody that has spent time at APEC understands the vibrancy and the opportunity that interacting with that many different economies at once in a multilateral setting can have. And it's a very problem-solving agenda. So it's a very cooperative, very constructive agenda. And therefore, an opportunity for this president and his close staff to see the benefits of multilateralism directly. And I hope, anyway, that they find something to be excited about.
Mr. Zhang, this is the time that Chinese president and the U.S. president are carrying over their achievements being made during the visit by President Trump to China. And this is an interesting testing ground, but also an implementation ground about how the two countries can work together.
Yeah, this is after 19th Party's Congress in China. The first, so important leaders from the U.S. visit China, and two big countries' leaders must to discuss those important global issues, regional issues, and including APEC issues, as well as bilateral economic and trade relationship. Especially, I think that on APEC issues, two countries' leaders need to discuss how to promote APEC economic cooperation and how to explore, economic driving force and how to benefit each other. In this regard, I'm afraid that from Mr. Trump, actually now he pay attention much on bilateral cooperation instead of multilateral cooperation. But we hope that in this region, both bilateral and multilateral cooperation should be appreciated. Meanwhile, I'm afraid that TPP, RCEP, all of those multilateral, RTA negotiation also will be deepened on this APEC meeting.
Mr. Freeman, United States has scrapped off since President Trump comes into the office some of the bilateral trade deals. Will there be a chance that to resume some of those deals, at least being talked about, that possibility, at the APEC occasion?
Bilateral deals? I'm not sure that the president is in any kind of deal-making mode yet on a policy level. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, I would love to see the China and the United States restore discussions to build a bilateral investment treaty. That does not seem to be on anybody's agenda in Washington, unfortunately. So I think we'll have to wait to see President Trump's reactions to what actually will be a very, very long and very detailed trip to Asia.
That's right.
So we'll see.
How will their spirit of so-called cooperation be tested this time? Or this is likely when it's on a bigger platform. Both sides going to express in their own ways, which might not necessarily coincide with one another. Mr. Zhang.
Yeah, I think that China, U.S., and other members, we should play, a constructive role on platform of APEC. So in this regard, from Chinese side, we hope that, of course, we respect existing cooperation mechanism on platform of APEC. That means in different fields, we have so lot of working groups and trade, investment, growth, innovation, something like that. As well as free trade agreements. On the other hand, from Chinese side, we also provided new idea and new concepts such as the Belt and Road Initiative. That means we hope APEC cooperation will be more comprehensive. Also, we can reject some of new elements such as infrastructure connectivities, people-to-people connectivities, and culture exchange, something like that.
Yeah, particularly, Mr. Zhang, this is the very first time, this is the very first multilateral platform meeting point for Chinese President Xi Jinping after the 19th Party Congress. And during the Party Congress report, China was talking about a global community of shared future. China was also talking about the new type of big power relations. China was talking about it providing of solutions and possibly models to the region and beyond. How much will that be demonstrated, Mr. Zhang?
Yeah, I think that bilateral, multilateral, and global cooperation actually they can promote each other. So in this regard, actually on APEC platform, we can promote both bilateral and multilateral cooperation. And also, for example, if you look at those free trade agreements, bilateral free trade agreements will promote multilateral free trade agreements. But
I see.
Yeah, but for some countries, they prefer to choose bilateral. That's also okay.
Okay, Mr. Freeman, what about your thought?
Well, no, I think at the end of the day, this is going to be an opportunity for all sides to take each other's measure, and I don't foresee tremendous new steps being taken on any individual trade agreement, frankly, in this context. But so I think more of this is about for the U.S. From the U.S. perspective, this is about giving President Trump an opportunity to visit the region, to spend some time getting to know other folks and establish his multilateral credentials, hopefully. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, with that, we're coming to the end of this round of discussion, at least for now. Charles Freeman, Tian Wei, Zhang Jianping. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, our APEC special coming to you from Da Nang, from the APEC Economic Leaders Week. Still to come on our program. An exclusive with World Bank Vice President on trade cooperation in the Asia Pacific. Another exclusive with Malaysia's Minister for International Trade and Industry on TPP or RCEP. welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you from Da Nang for the APEC Economic Leaders Week. The APEC 2017 Senior Officials Meeting has just concluded in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang. They discussed measures to speed up free and open trade and investment while seeking closer cooperation. Here, I interviewed Victoria Kwakwa, World Bank Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific region. She expressed her views on the achievements and challenges of the region. Victoria Kwakwa, welcome to CGTN.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you, ma'am. One of the first questions I need to ask you, since you're the expert, I guess, about the Asia-Pacific region, is how is the economy doing here? It seems that there are different kinds of growth models. Which one works?
Well, look, the economies in the region are doing great. We predict that growth this year will be about 6.4%. It's underpinned by strong domestic demand, but also has benefited from some external factors, including the continued recovery in advanced economies, some fall-off in commodity prices, so some recovery, in commodity prices, and also global interest rates have been low. So you have all these coming together, supporting these economies, and their growth is great. Now, as you know, this region is also for some time now been the engine of global growth and has contributed significantly to global growth. So generally, they're in good shape. There are some vulnerabilities that are domestic, vulnerabilities that come from the external side. On the domestic side, you know, quite a few of the countries are rather highly leveraged, and you have high debt levels, including private debt and public debt as well. And so that could be a stress point, particularly if global interest rates rise faster than anticipated. Another challenge or risk is the geopolitical tensions, which everybody is watching carefully. I don't think it's put a dampening effect on investments in the region yet, but depending on what happens, you know, it could very well do that. So that's something else to watch. And then on the external side as well, you have the issue about protectionist sentiment globally, and particularly in some of the advanced countries. And
these are, of course, very big issues. Let's approach them one by one, maybe. First of all, there are a lot of debates about what kinds of trade mechanisms to be used and platforms to be used for this Asia-Pacific region. I know you're from the World Bank, but this is important for the economy and for the growth of this region. Has become one of the engines of the world growth. So what about RCEP? What about TPP? What about all of these technological terms, but eventually they're going to decide on the fate of this region?
The first point is that trade has been good for this region, and they've opened up and they've benefited from trade. Now, they see the benefits of trade and integration, and so are looking for various ways to continue to integrate. The TPP was one, as you said. The future is rather uncertain. There's a sense that the TPP 11 might go it, but that's still being discussed. The AEC, which is an ASEAN platform, is still a work in progress, and the RCEP, similarly.
A lot of
now, and then a lot of the countries are doing bilateral agreements. You know, Vietnam has done a lot of bilateral trade agreements. So what I'm saying is integration is continuing, and it's continuing on different platforms.
Well, we could say that, but at the same time, efficiency is very important because we urgently need a growth engine. So these negotiations cannot just take on for years and years to finish. TPP, for example, has been there. 11 economies are still working on it. There are debates about who should be part of it. And then there's RCEP talking about 2 to even 5 years, even though the deadline was earlier. So, you know, all of these things going on, we can't have that patience. We need the growth engine.
Sure, but the point is, it's not as if while you're doing these discussions, life stops. Life goes on, and countries must and do indeed continue the structural reform agenda. You know, so you have a structural reform agenda, which is what is going to unleash the efficiency and the productivity that you need to continue to spur growth. And I think several of the countries are still very much focused on these agendas and continuing to implement them.
Right.
And then, of course, trade will also help. In any case, they need to implement these agendas to be competitive, you know, and to move towards a more productivity-led growth model.
You know, Victoria, as we are talking about right here, the bilateral meeting that the world is looking at between China and the United States is also taking place. What do you expect these two countries, two of the biggest economies of the world and certainly of the region, to do at this point?
Well, I think, look, everybody's looking to these two countries. They are in different ways leaders, you know, and I think that if they can agree on a way to live together and to cooperate and to be leaders in a joint manner, I think that would be great. Now, I don't want to prejudge the outcome of the conversations, but I think no. I think cooperation on the economic front, cooperation on political front in terms of resolving some of the tricky geopolitical issues, I think that would be great if they could work out some of these things.
Yeah.
You know, we need the two countries to get along. You know, it's good for all of us and it's good for the global community. So I think we're all watching to see what happens.
That's right. You see different economies are making their efforts to come up with their own remedies to their economy. As you said earlier, structural reform urgently needed for a lot of countries. China included. Earlier at the 19th Party Congress, Chinese Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC, talking about reform and opening up. Still one of the most important remedy for the Chinese economy. But what about, you know, for the other largest economies of the Asia-Pacific region, the U.S. included? What do you think from the World Bank's perspective for them to also be able to contribute not their own growth, but also the growth of the region?
Well, I don't think they're any different from China. Reform is going to be very important. You know, where everybody's talking about the fourth industrial revolution. What this means is that you're going to run your economies on higher productivity. It's fundamental, and you have to get in the game. You have to have your economies operate much more efficiently, fewer distortions, openness to new ideas, to innovations, get good institutions that allow you to maximize your potential. New drivers of growth are emerging. China is looking at new drivers of growth because clearly the labor-intensive manufacturing, export-driven growth will run its course for several countries over time. So what are the new things that will bring productivity? What are the new things that will bring efficiency? It's, to some extent, in several countries, second-generation market reforms and reforms that will make your economy continue to be dynamic and efficient and generate the productivity that you need.
We love reforms, of course, in the right direction.
Sure.
I guess that's also what World Bank is looking for right now, but there is a debate about whether the World Bank is also taking too much of its time on its path of reform. The governance structure of the World Bank, important debate. What about that now?
Well, look, at the annual meetings in Lima, Peru, I think that was 2016? 2015, at the annual meetings, our shareholders agreed to principles for a shareholding review, which would really modify, as you said, as part of the reforms to our governance and the voice. The question about how much voice our different shareholders have.
Right.
So principles were agreed that included the fact that it will have to be based on the evolution of the global economy and a contribution to the bank's mission. You know, and so this reform is what the bank has embarked on. At the annual meetings that were just completed in Washington in October, the shareholders expressed satisfaction with where the process is at.
You know, shareholders that you're talking about, Victoria, for the World Bank, a lot of them actually are coming from the developed economies whose share of governance is likely to be shared by the other developing and emerging economies. So the speed of the reform probably has to be assessed by the other players as well. So what about the international governance coming from the developing and emerging economies.
Well, we are seeing it already. We have the G20.
But we are not seeing it in the World Bank. That's what we're talking about.
But it's coming. It's coming. As I said, we've made a lot of progress. Our shareholders, including shareholders from developing countries, are satisfied with the progress that's been made. We will have the next set of meetings of the governors at the time of the spring meetings. And I think there as well, there will be progress to be reported. So I think there's genuine commitment to the reform, including on the part of our advanced country shareholders, and with the recognition that the world has changed since the creation of the World Bank, and that our governance structure also needs to evolve to reflect the changes that are happening in the global context. So I think there's acceptance of it. Now, then you have to do the difficult negotiations of finding what works for everybody. This is where we're at.
We understand your challenges, Victoria, at the World Bank, because on the one hand, some countries are questioning about the relevancy of the World Bank in terms of the role it could play for stimulating the world economy. But at the same time, there is a lack of funding for the World Bank and also lack of contribution to the World Bank from some of the economies. So it seems that you're being blamed and as also a victim of it as well. So how do you see this dilemma World Bank is facing? Let's just say from your role, Asia Pacific.
Sure. Look, let me say that I think the World Bank continues to have significant relevance. I think we're unique among several multilateral institutions in really being a global institution. That's number one. And I would start first with the knowledge that we bring to the table to our clients. I think that is very, very highly valued. And we're seeing that in the fact that you do have several clients that come to us, that ask us to work with them and ask to work with us on a fee basis, to advise them and to help them understand and work on difficult problems. That's one. And then, of course, we have the global eye view and can bring lessons of development from several countries. So that peer learning that we facilitate is also significant value added. Don't underestimate how hard it is for countries to get information about what works and what other countries have tried. And then, of course, we bring financing to the table. Now, on financing, let's say that if you take IDA, which is our most concessional arm, we've just completed a highly successful replenishment, which is historic. So there are no issues, and I think the funding is there. We're working with our IDA countries to really make sure that we have good plans for implementing it, so you have a transformational impact.
You are here to help economies, to bring possibly examples of best models for them to use as reference. And there are also discussions about models these days of developing of the economies. You see the models of China. Very low-income country, 1 billion people in poverty decades ago. And now it seems to be already getting somewhere to a certain extent. You also see models of long-time developed economies. So the question is, other economies are getting a little bit confused as to which model shall we look at, because there are a lot of details they have to figure out as well. So what do you think about this debate about models?
Well, I'm not really sure it's a debate as such, but I think it is true that at different points in development, countries need different models. So if you take several of the countries in East Asia, typically countries start with agriculture, and then move to more industrialization, manufacturing, then services, and a lot of them have worked with open models, integration at the basis of it, particularly East Asia, that have worked on models that really use trade, openness and integration to drive growth. And it works. Now, and then you get to a certain point where the advantages that you have from labor-intensive manufacturing dissipate. And then you have to find different models, which is probably more around services, which is more around highly productive productivity, high value added production models and so on. So I think the models of growth and development evolve over time, and I also think that you have to look at each country's situation and what works at a particular time. And I don't think there's a perfect solution. I think countries work it out as they go along and learn the lessons and refine and bring other lessons and contextualize it for their specific case.
Right. As we are talking, the APEC economic leaders meetings are going to take place very soon here in Da Nang in Vietnam. How much do you think, Victoria? Let's just be frank here. Let's just be frank. How much can be achieved?
Well, you know, I don't know what objectives they've set themselves, so we will wait to see. But my sense is that in the current global context, everybody is looking for ways forward. And I think APEC is looking for ways forward. And so my sense is that the leaders will come with a strong commitment to achieving concrete progress and making something tangible come out of the discussions. I don't have a crystal ball. We will have to wait and see what the 2 days bring.
Victoria, it's such a pleasure always to have you, and especially here in Da Nang for the APEC. What a pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to spend some time with you.
Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you from Vietnam for the APEC Economic Leaders Week here. The Asia-Pacific region has the most dynamic economies in the world, generating potential for multilateral trade mechanisms like TPP or RCEP. On the eve of the Economic Leaders meeting, I sit down with Mustafa bin Mohammed, Malaysian Minister for International Trade and Industry, who articulated Malaysia's pragmatism on trade cooperation. Mr. Minister, welcome to CGTN.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you, sir.
Yeah, nice weather here.
Absolutely.
Except
after
for
the
typhoon.
rain.
Yeah.
But many wonder, the weather is getting better. Will the APEC, the meetings here, also getting more efficient? Will APEC this year be a talk shop, or actually we're going to have something?
To say that APEC has been a talk shop all these years, I think it's not a good description of our achievements. And I know that the Vietnamese government has been putting a lot of effort. There's potential for some good outcomes coming from this meeting in Da Nang.
Yeah, but there are a lot of questions relating to the region, though. For example, RCEP. We understand that this is quite an idea that Malaysia is embracing right now, rather than the TPP. Tell us why.
There was a time when we were focusing a lot more on RCEP, that's a fact, especially when it became official on the 23rd of January that America is withdrawing from TPP. Before that, it was just a statement from the incoming president. Yes. But when President Trump was officially inaugurated, 20th of January, 23rd January, there was this official statement that they are saying goodbye to TPP. Since then, we've been working extra hard on RCEP. We've been working hard on RCEP for the last 3-4 years. And we've been working very hard with 15 other countries. But I must say in recent months, there's been quite a good pickup in activities surrounding TPP 11. And we've been part of that process. We've been playing a constructive role. We were part of TPP, partly because of the potential better access of the American market. That was TPP 12. But then when America wasn't going to be part of TPP, we had to do some recalculation. And in our view, provided certain conditions are met, then, you know, TPP 11 could be a viable option. Therefore, in the last few weeks, I would say as State Minister from Malaysia, we've been giving equal priority to TPP 11 and RCEP. But before that, especially a few months after the official announcement, we have been quite slow in embracing TPP-11. Yeah?
I see. Are you struggling to balance? It sounds you are struggling to balance between these two. To me,
no, it's not a struggle. I mean, our position has been these are equally important. Yeah, we see them as complementing each other. Yeah.
And what about the other things? It seems that governments are struggling around the world, trying to come up with some kind of mechanism, but the private sector is running much more ahead than the governments, the civil societies too. For example, the EWTP, if I remember it right, which is the Electronic World Trading Platform, that is proposed by Alibaba from China. Mr. Minister, are the governments losing out to the other sectors of the world?
A few days ago, we had Jack Ma in KL launching the first digital free trade zone outside of China. And the governments, of course, are responding to this fast-changing development in ASEAN. We've been talking a lot about e-commerce. In Malaysia, we have a national e-commerce master plan. In APEC, we are very, very keen to have discussions on this matter, including digital economy. Yes, you're right, the private sector is moving very fast, and we wish, Malaysia's view is that the government's got to respond quickly to some of these developments.
So congratulations, of course, at Malaysia being the very first country, being the
There's
very
a lot of
first
excitement in
country.
Malaysia, yeah. Within a few months, I mean, it happens so quickly, yeah.
And also, you have to build a lot of storage places for all of these products.
Yeah.
So that being done within just a few months' time is quite a miracle, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. The good thing about this is that, of course, firstly, there's efficient clearance of cargo, of course, a bigger market. The other is we can keep track, I mean, in terms of data, you know, what kind of products is it. I mean, we're going to be in possession of a lot of data, and that can be used for many things, for planning.
Mr. Minister, there used to be a time when the world seems to be rallied around certain ideas. Globalization,
yes,
for example.
Yes.
Trade.
Yeah.
Trade gonna help everybody.
Yes.
Exchanges would benefit everyone.
Yeah.
But now we see a world very much divided. We don't have common values anymore. It's very hard to do things, particularly business, which is your area. Mr. Minister, in your job, how can you face a situation like this? What needs to be changed in order to be fixed?
Yes, indeed. Yes, some people have not fully benefited from globalization, and it's working. For example, in Malaysia, there's been, you know, in terms of Gini coefficient, for example, there's been an improvement in income distribution. We have done well in poverty eradication. And this is a temporary aberration, yeah, overreaction to some of the rough edges of globalization, and we believe we'll be back on our senses, and people will go back to the multilateral trading system.
Well, we hope everybody could be as relaxing as you just said, but things are not like that, because the growth of the world economy really needs a central idea for everybody to rally around, particularly the major economies. So for Malaysia, in the region of ASEAN, how do you see your roles at this rough time? How do you balance that? That is a question.
Firstly, some major countries, China, Europe, America, growth is still quite robust. For Malaysia, we are strong believers in closer economic integration, and ASEAN is the place where there is concrete evidence that the opening up of our economies have resulted in a higher level of economic growth. I mean, you have the dynamism in ASEAN, and you have China still playing a constructive role in terms of you know, providing, you know, good source of economic growth. Therefore, these have become good drivers of global economic growth. You have China, you have India, and ASEAN. This probably with the three pillars, certainly in Asia, but even in the world, you know, we have China, India, and ASEAN growing at.
Now it seems that things are changing. The decision-making process is moving around the world and spread around the world. When it comes to this year's APEC, when it comes to ASEAN meetings, with China, with the Northeast Asian region, with 6 partners, people get extremely excited.
RCEP is new, TPP is new, but Davos continues to have that attraction, yeah,
Of course.
where we consider Davos to be a platform very important. I mean, the big speech by President Xi, for example, beginning of this year, you know, created a lot of waves throughout the world. So this is a very significant event in the history of Davos. I mean, in the past it's been, so in a way, US and Western Europe has played a very important role in Davos, but this year you have China filling up that gap. So for us, Davos will continue to play a useful role. Yeah.
That's our exclusive with the Malaysian Trade Minister. And that is all the time we have here for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and all the team here in Da Nang, Vietnam, and back in Beijing, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world.